the Global Studies Podcast. This is episode 6, and I'm Alicia Mackey, your Global Studies teacher for 6th grade.
And my name is Gregory Wright. I'm the Global Studies Coordinator for Global Academies and the Global Excursion Liaison here at Global Leadership Academy West.
And I'm Dr. K, 5th grade Global Studies and Science Educator for Legendary Academy.
This month is Women's History Month, and it's such a great month that we're going to dedicate this entire series for this month of the Global Studies Podcast to International Women's Month. So on this date in 1910, the world formally celebrates International Women's Day. Since its beginning, International Women's Day is a global celebration of the wellness of women. Started at a time of great social turbulence and crisis, International Women's Day inherited traditions of protest and political activism. Yet, since its inception, there has been a pattern of racial exclusion of women of color, specifically Black women. So as we're looking at this month's series of Women's History Month, we're going to bring on a lot of guests to talk about, why women's history is so important, why we celebrate this, why we should continue to celebrate women, and why it's so important to keep that history of the women's suffrage and things that we went through back in the time to even now that we are still going through. Why is that so important to have conversations with our scholars at home, and especially with our queens? And we also host here at GLA the Queens Empowerment series that's going on that I also hope that you guys tune into, which is another great series of conversations that women are having for our queens to, build empowerment and kind of give us the full-fledged grown woman conversation. So without further ado, Mr. Wright, can you introduce our guest for today?
Yes, and prior to introducing our amazing guest today, I just want to just add on just a little tidbit to the wonderful presentation that Ms. Mackey has stated in terms of introducing Women's History Month. It began as a local celebration in Santa Rosa, California, and the National Month of Recognition was instituted as a national month, actually as a national week, by President Jimmy Carter, and then what happened was Congress passed it on to a month. So this month we're going to recognize the vital role women have played, especially women of color have played throughout the course of history in our country and locally. And with that being said, it's a perfect segue. It's my honor, my privilege to introduce to you the founder and CEO of Global Academies, Dr. Naomi Johnson Booker. Dr. Booker, welcome.
Good morning. How are you? How's everybody today?
We're all fine.
Good.
And bottom line, Dr. Booker, we just want to thank you in advance for all that you've done and the opportunities that you've made and the contributions you've made, not just locally, but statewide and nationally, and making a way for children of color to receive equality and equitable education and a world-class education here at Global Academies. But our question to you today, and what we would like to speak to our audience about today, is women's history, and most importantly about the women's history, specifically with you. Starting out, and I'm sure that most folks know, if you don't know, this young lady from West Philadelphia, growing up, going to local neighborhood schools. What was the inspiration? Who were the women in your life that gave you that intrinsic motivation to continue to become and move forward, to become the academic, the contributor to academic success, not just through Philadelphia, but throughout the nation?
I'm going to go back to me growing up in West Philadelphia. I went to Blankenberg School across the street, Huey, which is now Global Leadership Academy South. I don't know who influenced me when I was a young child. Today, and what we're doing at GLA, we have the opportunity to now influence young people at early ages. Coming along in a society that was predominantly white in the schools that I went to, and then going to girls' high school, where there was not a Black woman at the school teaching at all. When I got to 12th grade, there was the hiring of a Black woman, and me and my friends, we ran all around the building trying to find her, because there was nothing that was really saying to me that Black teachers or Black women could teach us, because that's not what I had. I had one African American teacher in 4th grade all the way through, and the rest of my teaching was basically by Caucasians. So on that side, to say what influenced me, it wasn't from the schooling or it wasn't from the outside. It was really my mother and her sisters, who were Black women raising themselves up by their bootstraps in West Philadelphia. They were high school graduates. They were entrepreneurs. My mother was, I will say, a hustler in terms of the fact that we grew up 52nd and Market Street, and so on the weekend she would open up a thrift shop, and all week long she would collect items, and then on Friday it would open up Friday and Saturday, and she would sell used clothing to people in the neighborhood. She also sewed buttons in a factory on dress clothes for children, at 10th and Spring Garden. And so every Christmas, when the owner would give to the people who sewed the buttons on the coats, take coats for your children. And so my sister and I walked around in Rothschild's coats with velvet buttons and muffs and ear muffs, because that was the way she raised us. Always raised us to be doing our best. We didn't go to roller skating rinks. We went to ice skating rinks. We went to the ice capades, and we dressed the part. She would make. She was a seamstress, so she would make skirts and ice skating figures on them, and we would go to the ice skating rink. So there was a difference in the way that she was raising me, but I didn't know it. Okay, I didn't. I just thought this was the way you got raised. My church was African American. Everything around me, I could see that, but I didn't realize it until I went to Spelman College. And when I went to Spelman College and was thrust into a world of blackness, if you will, because I had a white doctor, I had a white dentist, there were white lawyers. But when I went to Atlanta, when everything was black doctor, black lawyers, black funeral directors, everything. And that was where our people supported. Why? Because they were not allowed to go the other way, if you will. So there becomes my growing upness, if you will. And that was when I started looking around and seeing teachers who were black. There was a woman who was, my Spanish teacher was black, and she had a Southern Spanish accent.
Interesting.
And that was how I learned Spanish, but it was very different. But there was where I started to see my color and what we could do and who we were. The president of the college was black, though he was a man, but he was black.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of African American women who were in and out of the offices. And so there's where my life started. Atlanta was a place where a lot of the movement started. So there was a lot of activity. And so when people came to the city to do a civil rights issue or a civil rights sit-in or something like that, one of the places they stopped was Spelman College. And so during the lunchtime, and every college that on Friday at 12 o'clock, there's always everybody goes to the round, and we called it the round there, right. And everybody, sits and talks, and that's where I saw Stokely Carmichael and Cassius Clay before he was, Muhammad Ali, and here came Angela Davis. Ooh, who is this person with a bush this big, red, and I just all of a sudden was just being drawn into women. Because all before it was Dr. King, it was Stokely Carmichael, it was Rat Brown, and here she comes. And so for me, just as a sidebar, when I graduated 4 years from Spelman College, I was an Angela Davis. I had a bush this big, it was red, and that was how I started my teaching career here in Philadelphia.
I knew you liked red.
Yeah. Actually, my first car was bright red.
I knew it.
We'll deal with that episode.
We'll deal with that episode later.
A couple weeks, yes.
But there's where it started. And so that was kind of when I started looking at women and who we were. And where did I fit?